Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Gaynor, and I am the community coordinator for socialbizug.org. And I am delighted to have Mark Roden. And Mark, did I pronounce that right? Is it Roden?
Yep.
And I also know you sometimes go by Marky.
Yes. Yes, I do.
No, not Marky Mark, or
Yeah. No.
yeah.
Not. No. 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 Yes. No. You know, you
All
had to
right, I
bring that
won't
up,
go
didn't
there.
you?
I won't go there. Uh,
Oh, you totally went there.
Mark, it is a pleasure having you here today. So let's get started. Can I start with your elevator resume? Can you tell me what you do, who you work for, if you're allowed to say? Just give me your basic job description.
Okay. I work for PSC Group, based out of the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I'm a senior solutions architect. And I've been doing Lotus Notes domino development since 1979, which is longer than I want to admit, but it is what it is. My role at PSC is as much lead architect, program management, and things like that, more so than day-to-day developer. But I have my hand in multiple pots, multiple different projects, and what have you, going on within the company.
Excellent. If I may, I'd like to deviate just slightly from my questions. You would say you're an architect. Now, when I think of an architect, I think building buildings. Can you give me more of a definition of how that
Okay,
applies
well,
with
let me
what you
let me
do?
give you an example.
Yeah,
Okay,
perfect.
so we have a global customer who has a centrally hosted application and is concerned that worldwide access to this application could be slow from certain different corners of the globe. It's a web-based application. So they wanted the application to be primarily quick, responsive, but still look really, really great. And obviously, part of the problem with modern, web frameworks and what have you is they can look really, really good, but they're also big at times to download and use. So part of my job in that particular scenario was to come up with the best solution to the problem, to work with my team internally to basically prototype the capability, and then go back to the customer, demonstrate what it does, how quick and responsive to it is to use. And then from there, they then showed it internally, got approved, and then development began. So my role as an architect is to come up with that overarching, how are we going to do this, rather than the day-to-day building this form, building that form, building this page, building that page, and so on and so forth. So that's what architect, so much more means to me than the day-to-day developer, is coming up with the big picture solution and building up the architecture on paper in the customer's mind before we actually go ahead and do it.
Got it. And thank you very much for letting me go off track there. I think that's the best definition I've ever heard. I actually understand it. So
Okay.
thank you for that. So can you describe for me any recent challenges you may have had and what you did to overcome them?
Well, it's funny actually because that was going to be my example, wasn't it?
Oh, no,
I
that's
just
all right. That
yeah.
works
Well,
just
so
fine.
especially going into a little bit more detail about what we did.
Please.
So in and around the community and what have you, I've been talking about Angular JS for a year or so now, and this is the largest application that we've actually done with that. So basically, the fundamental problem with generating your web pages server side is that it's very powerful, but all of the HTML gets downloaded to the page. So if you have a big page with a large number of results, there is an overhead for all the tables and the table rows and table tails and what have you that gets sent to the browser. So using Angular, what we do is we have a tiny little HTML template that we then just send the data, and then we let the browser actually do all the work of building the web page itself. So the one example that we had was the finished page was nearly 800 kilobytes in size.
Wow. That's a big
However,
page.
the amount of data that got sent over the wire was only 150K. So that is a 3, 4, whatever it is, times improvement in not only getting something to appear on the page, but actually getting it to the user and making it appear quickly. Now, if you're on an internal massive super fast network, you're not going to notice any different. But if you're in the middle of nowhere on a slow connection and also potentially on a mobile device, that makes a significant difference. And that's how we approach that particular challenge, and we'll continue to do so in the future, I believe.
Mark, that's really incredible. I mean, seriously, that to go from an 800 KB page to sending, what did you say, 150?
150, yeah.
That's amazing.
So even 150 kilobytes worth of data is still a lot of data. But the requirements for this particular item were such that so you're looking at a results page. It's very frustrating when you go to Google in a sense and you go, is that the one I want? No, and you have to go back. Is that the one you want? Is that the one you want? Is that the one you want? Hunting and pecking for the answer you're looking for. So within this particular system, what we did was we downloaded a preview of the end items, so the user can see the results. Then they can just mouse over and see a preview of the page itself, and that comes up instantly. So they can go, yeah, not that one, not that one, not that one. That's the one I want. Because at that hunting and pecking, when you go into the page and you come back out again and it has to reload, it's time consuming. Yes. So we spent an awful lot of time on this particular application with the user experience, more so than we have done on some other projects that are, just for an internal network. And that was actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing the architecting part of that more so than we need a form, it's got to have 50 fields on it, they need to be numbers and whatever. It's much more fun to solve an old problem in a new way, in a sense.
I absolutely, I agree with that 100%, and I'm just still really wowed at the tiny amount that you're sending through the wire, at the massive amount you're getting at the other end. I find that fascinating.
It's because your modern computer now, sitting on your desktop that we're talking on, is now as powerful as the servers used to be 10 years ago when they all had to be done that way. So because you've got much more powerful end machines, they're now capable of doing the heavy lifting.
I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, okay. No, meaning, in some ways, I guess, web architecture is way behind, or maybe not architecture is the right word, but the way a web works between you and your machine and the server is probably 10 years behind what the power that's on your desk.
It's evolving. It's evolving. I mean, once we really embrace cloud, Bluemix, for example, and IBM, what have you, when we start talking about microservices and the bare amount of information going backwards and forwards from lots of different places, but then actually starting to do the work on your computer because it's the central hub between all the different services, that's where we're going. That's how we've evolved into this position with being able to use cloud and services.
That's awesome. I will quit being fanboy here on that, because I was really wowed by that.
Okay. Cool.
And you gave me a perfect segue by mentioning IBM Bluemix.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So, all right. So you have a blog about IBM Bluemix and taking your skills to the cloud. Right. So I'm going to make this question a bit of a twofer. Can you elaborate a little more on exactly what Bluemix is? And how, as a developer, I could use it. And then for the second part of the question, what are your top tips for someone that does want to take their skill set to the cloud?
Okay, so all right, so IBM Bluemix is there are different levels of cloud. You've got infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. There's some examples. So your Gmail, for example, is software as a service. You use their program in the cloud. And oddly enough, I started using Yahoo Mail nearly 20 years ago. Its cloud has always been there. We just started calling it cloud. So a platform as a service. Infrastructure as a service would be something like you create something on Amazon Web Services where they host a Windows virtual machine. You log into the virtual machine, you install your web server, you maintain the web server and all the patching and what have you. So that will be infrastructure. The platform as a service goes one level beyond that and actually provides the web servers for you. So in our world, and actually hopefully, well, they've promised it this month, and I'm going to say this month, we're going to get X pages in Bluemix. So what that means is you don't have to worry about the server. You don't create the server. You don't patch the server. You just use the server. You use the runtime, or you use the document storage that is in the cloud. So the responsibility of administering the server goes away. So from a developer's perspective, this makes it really exciting that you can just literally go in and stand up a new server by clicking a button that says, I want a new server. And then it gets up there and you can start to prototype things and mess around with things. And so beyond that, because it's in the cloud, you get a number of advantages that come with the platform that IBM are pushing, and other vendors are too, like scalability. So, for example, you're a startup, you've got a web page, you're thinking big, you're thinking you're going to need a million people coming and hitting your web page every week, but you can't afford to buy half a server farm to do that. So you architect and you build your application on something like Bluemix, and then you can set up monitoring tools and services that exist within Bluemix, and then as your usage grows, you can actually add more scale to your application. And what that also does is that means you can control costs. So instead of having to go out and buy a huge server because you think they're going to come, you actually pay for what you use. So when they do come, and you've got more money because they're coming, you can pay for more scaling. It also means you don't have to do, so it does load balancing for you, it does failover for you. So instead of having a whole rack full of servers that you have to buy up front, you don't need any of that. And from a developer's perspective, even from an existing company's perspective, there are significant cost savings to be had by getting rid of the redundant hardware that you have within your organization and being able to move it into the cloud. So then, so Bluemix today. We're about to get X pages, but you can set up a Node web server. You can set up a Liberty server. So our X pages JavaScript or Java skills that you already have, you can use them in different ways with different web servers up in Bluemix. So the skills that you already have, very applicable. But instead of you having to go and buy a server to put all this on, it's there and ready for you. So to be able to take your skills to the cloud is really not much more than opening yourself to the possibility of doing something a little different outside of your comfort zone. And we're not talking, right, you need to go and learn .NET. Doable, but, we all have, we like to go home and spend time with our kids. We don't, 40 hours a week is more than enough. So you're not, if you can do Java, you can do JavaScript. It's not, it really, so it's a zero leap to be able to do Node.js. We're all very used to using Stack Overflow and Google to go and find all of our answers. I guarantee you somebody else has already failed and solved the problem before you get there. So yay sharing. Go and find what somebody else has done. That's how I learned how to use Node. So part of my getting into Bluemix a year ago was because I had a suspicion that X pages was coming, but also it's an excuse for me to learn Node.js without having to work very hard or costing me anything. It's all JavaScript. So as long as you can do JavaScript, it's really not that hard. Somebody else has done a lot of the work for you. There are so many examples out there. You can truly take what you know and with only a little bit of effort, start to learn something new. and it doesn't cost you anything. And you can't get better than that, really. I mean, my favorite word right now is evolution. It's if we have to evolve as a developer. Stuff that we do today, we weren't doing 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, unless you're a Lotus Notes developer, which we were doing all of this 15 years ago. Most everybody else is, I mean, yes, we're doing Lotus Notes development, but we're still doing the same Lotus script. We're still doing it hasn't really evolved, The web moves. 18 months from now, what we're doing today will be old and people won't want it. People's availability to the internet and the constant updates that they get on their cell phones, they want new stuff now. So we have to evolve as a developer and go with it. So instead of just going, you know what, I'm going to stop and I'm going to learn a whole new language, which is unrealistic, see where the things are going, evolve with it. Don't wait until somebody else tells you that you have to change. That is never a pleasant experience, and there is only usually one very unpleasant conversation that happens during that. So evolve yourself, take control of your skill set and what you're able to do, and it's really not that hard. I'm really not that smart. If I can do it, then so can everybody else. Well, I can just talk. That's what I can do. But there are way better developers than me, certainly that work at PSC, and I'm sure in other places as well. Different skills.
Yeah, I won't speak to how smart you are, but I will say that's some pretty good advice. That very good. All right, let's get into a little bit of fun stuff. You and I were talking before, and I just wanted to mention one thing that I'm kind of proud of. I volunteer where I live at my local zoo. And cool. I've been loving it. It's an amazing experience. And I do have to say, give me the kids over the adults any day of the week. But I have a great time. So I understand you do some volunteer work as well. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. So I'm generally one of these people that tends to, my general outlook is if you don't like something, then don't just sit there and whine and complain about it. Go and actually do something about it. I've actually, I haven't done it this year since we moved to Illinois, but for the last 10 plus years, I've actually volunteered as a soccer coach for my son. Because when he started doing it, the guy who was the coach, loved him to pieces, great man, and he volunteered to do it for his son, but he didn't know the first thing about soccer. Literally, he didn't know the first thing about soccer. So, great that he would coach 5-year-olds, but ultimately he's not going to be able to take them, as long as they want to go. And over that 10 years, I really enjoyed making relationships with the kids and making them better in a sense. Working with the parents. And in a similar vein, a few years ago, I was the president of the Parent Teachers Association at the local school, because again, the lady, the people that were doing it and were very involved and were very keen, didn't have the kind of management background to be able to deal with what they were trying to do. So what I was able to do was to basically come in and treat it almost like a project. And, basically say, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to get there. This is, we've got this big event coming up in 3 months and we've got no idea how we're going to do it. So we're going to sit down, we're going to come out with a plan. And, to me, it's not that complicated because that's what I do every day. Every other day anyway. But, we for over the 2 years that I was president, we raised a substantial amount of money for the school, both years, which went to, we put on events for kids, we bought equipment and books for the school. And ultimately, it's my kids there. It's not like I walked into a random school and said, hey, I want to volunteer, but it's still a volunteer position. You don't get paid for it. And it's quite time consuming, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's extremely fulfilling.
Yes.
So get involved with these things. It's a little frustrating at times where you see people complain that volunteers doing stuff on their free time isn't good enough. Well, you're not volunteering, you're not doing anything, so what gives you the right to complain about it? If you don't like it, do something about it. And it's all a matter of, it's time and effort and, what's important to you. And I'm sure, same thing for you with The View. You want to help make people better. You know what I mean.
Yep.
And the look on their face when they realize what you've done for them, and that's all you need.
It really is. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we're a small zoo, but we do have 3 African lions, and the looks on these kids' faces when I describe just how big these things are, because most people don't realize that just how big they are.
Right.
And watching the wonder that appears on their face is makes it all worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're creating memories that will last them forever.
Well, yeah. Well,
And,
I
and
hope so.
you don't want to think about that too much, but that's kind of cool as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We are down to it now. This is the most important question of the interview.
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite movie and why?
It's going to have to be a tie,
Okay.
both for the same reason. It would be Underworld
Ooh.
and The Matrix. And the reason, very certainly for The Matrix, it was at that time in my life, watching a lot of movies, and the leap in special effects in that movie. Not only was it a cool movie with lots of action, but the leap in special effects was just something that left us a real kind of, impression about what a fantastic movie it is. And Underworld as well, very cool effects and what have you, but also a great story. These are both the kinds of movies that when they come on, it's like Harry Potter. It's on TV, I'm just going to sit down and watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, just those two great stories. Definitely fantasy. That's definitely my kind of stuff. But yeah, so there you go.
very nice. Do you have one more moment? I'd love to throw in a bonus question if you have
Oh,
time.
Lord.
You sure?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
Well then, and I try and keep it easy. Have you read any good books lately? And I mean either for just for fun or for work or whatever. Anything you could recommend?
Not really. No, I'm not
That's
really a book reader. So that's really, the only books I read are really, reference books for programming, and they're not even really books anymore. They're online PDFs and what have you. I've got so. I guess if I was going to recommend a book, it would have to be JavaScript: The Good Parts by Douglas. Oh God, Crockett, whatever his name is. It's not a very big book, and it was written quite a while ago, and it's not all of the good parts now. However, there's a bunch of stuff in there that is very fundamental to the way that people program JavaScript frameworks and what have you right now. And if you don't understand the fundamentals of it, then it makes it a lot harder for you to be able to take advantage of it.
Mark, that's a perfect recommendation. That's outstanding. All right.
And I'll remember his name later. I just look, whatever.
All right. I think I've taken up enough of your time.
Okay.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. And for everyone out there on Social Biz, I will see you on the site. Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much, mate.